Welcome to Beyond Borders, the podcast dedicated to exploring how gender, sexuality, and national identity intersect across the French-speaking world. In today's episode, we'll talk about the concept of homonationalism and how LGBTQ+ rights in France have been manipulated to define national belonging, often in ways that marginalize Muslim and immigrant communities. We'll also explore how storytelling, particularly in West African cinema, can challenge dominant national narratives.
Let's start with a critical question. How do gender and sexuality shape ideas of belonging, citizenship, and national identity? Homonationalism refers to the incorporation of LGBTQ+ rights into nationalist rhetoric to justify exclusionary policies. In France, these rights are often seen as symbols of the nation's openness, especially when contrasted with immigrant and Muslim communities. This framing links LGBTQ+ identity with what it means to be truly French, making those who are seen as rejecting these values, often racial or religious minorities, appear as outsiders.
This narrative played out during the debates over marriage for all in 2013. While the law's passage was a big victory for LGBTQ+ rights, the way people talked about it often created a radical divide. The secular, tolerant French versus the marginalized Muslims. In the article, Gay Universalism, Homonationalism, and Marriage for All, Horia Boutedia critiques this universalist framing of LGBTQ+ rights, arguing that it creates racial and colonial hierarchies. She points out that French universalism works as a mechanism of exclusion, where assimilation into French values becomes a requirement for full citizenship. This means that LGBTQ+ Muslims and immigrants are often placed in a difficult position. They are expected to choose between their cultural and/or religious identities and their sexual gender identities.
While dominant national narratives in France continue to frame LGBTQ+ rights within a homonationalist framework, alternative storytelling provides a powerful means of resistance. West African filmmakers like Rahmato Keita and Fanta Nakro use film to reclaim cultural narratives and offer new ways of understanding belonging. This work draws from Sahelian oral traditions, emphasizing communal memory and intergenerational storytelling as forms of cultural continuity. In these traditions, storytelling is not just a form of entertainment, but a deeply rooted practice that transmits knowledge, history, and moral values across generations. Through spoken word, music, and performance, these narratives reinforce a sense of shared identity and historical consciousness. By incorporating these elements into their films, Keita and Nakro challenge colonial and Western frameworks of storytelling that often dominate cinema. Their works serve as acts of cultural preservation and resistance, providing alternative ways of thinking about identity, history, and social change.
Another example is Jean Pierre's Beccolo film, Grandma's Grammar, which challenges conventional historical narratives, specifically those imposed by colonialism. By emphasizing an elder's perspective, Beccolo critiques the suppression of African ways of knowing and highlights the importance of ancestral knowledge in shaping identity. This work offers an alternative lens through which to view gender and sexuality, not as Western imports, but as complex, historically rooted aspects of African societies.
Today, LGBTQ+ activism in France remains intertwined with broader political struggles over race, religion, and national identity. Right-wing and far-right politicians have weaponized LGBTQ+ rights to push anti-immigrant and Islamophobic policies, portraying France as a safe place for sexual minorities compared to allegedly intolerant Muslim societies. However, queer activists of color challenge this framing, advocating for an intersectional approach that recognizes how race, class, and religion shape LGBTQ+ experiences.
As we've explored, gender and sexuality are deeply embedded and national identity and citizenship debates. While LGBTQ+ rights in France have been used to define belonging, they have also been instrumentalized to marginalize Muslim and immigrant communities. However, alternative narratives, especially those emerging from post-colonial perspectives, offer resistance to these exclusionary frameworks.
By challenging these dominant narratives, these perspectives encourage a more inclusive understanding of national identity that embraces diversity and recognizes the complexities of belonging in a globalized world. To our listeners, we hope this conversation gave you some insight into the complexities of gender, sexuality, and national identity. Stay tuned to Beyond Borders for more critical discussions and diverse perspectives from across the French-speaking world. Thanks for listening.